Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a gaming switch, the Gateron Pro V3 Silver. Let's get started. Now, this is the third generation of this switch, however you can still buy the first and second generation from Gateron's website if you so wish. But you're probably wondering what's new about this generation. Well, there's two major changes, the first being a change in the top housing which now allows for more light distribution. So if you're a fan of RGB lighting, this is for you. Now the second change is a more durable set of contact pins which should result in less damage during shipping. This is a really nice quality of life upgrade in my opinion. Also, I noticed something quite strange when researching this switch. If you take a look at this picture which shows the lineup of the V3, you can see that only the Speed Silver has dustproofing, and this is true across all the generations. I don't know why this is though. Now, pricing wise, these are $38 for 110 switches on Gateron, placing these in the budget range. Additionally, this is also the price for the second gen, but the first gen is $2 cheaper at $36. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now let's move on to the switch categories. On-center key presses are super smooth with almost zero hints of scratchiness even at very slow key presses. Off-center key presses are also very smooth with only minimal scratchiness, although a couple of my keys have audible but very quiet scratch noises. It's barely noticeable though. Overall, these are by far the smoothest of the dedicated gaming switches I've tested, 8 out of 10. Now, according to Gateron, these switches have an actuation force of 45 grams at 1.2mm and a bottom out force of 50 grams at 3.4mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, they aren't as sensitive as the specs would suggest. They feel like they actuate closer to 1.5mm, which for me is fantastic since it made it more bearable to use, but this could be disappointing for those hoping for a cheaper MX Silver alternative. Now, regarding the overall weighting, it's very light across the travel as with most gaming switches, so this isn't surprising to see here. Additionally, these were also extremely consistent. Honestly, if you told me Acco made these, I'd believe you. These are impressively consistent and I wasn't expecting that. Overall, despite the positive light I've shown these switches in, they are still very sensitive and lightly weighted, which isn't to my preference sadly. 4 out of 10. Now, sound is the least interesting part about these switches. They're clacky but not overly so. Plus, since they're smooth, you don't hear any significant scratchy noises. They sound solid in other words. Overall, I suspect the target audience for this probably won't be too focused on their sound, but in case you do care, they're pretty good. 7 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, I want to start by saying that speed switches aren't designed for typing. That rule applies with these as well. Firstly, even though these are less sensitive compared to other gaming switches, they are still way too sensitive for any kind of typing. I made plenty of typos and honestly I'm just glad these didn't feel as sensitive as the MX Silver despite what the spec sheet suggests. And secondly, for whatever reason, these have a harder bottom out when compared to other linear switches, even gaming ones. Maybe it's something to do with the dual spring or the shorter travel. I'm not sure. Either way, it's not comfortable for typing, but it's not a deal breaker. Now, apart from that, these performed smoothly and extremely consistently throughout my testing period. more so compared to previous speed switches I've tried out. Overall, I still don't like sensitive and lightly weighted switches for typing, despite this being one of the better speed switches out there. 4 out of 10. Now we finally come to gaming performance, which this was designed for, and you know what? It performed really well here. However, I will say that yes, these are still too sensitive for me, but they were surprisingly usable even if I personally wouldn't use these for any kind of gaming. Also, I want to say that these performed equally well in both fast and slow paced games, although I find them more reliable for slower paced games as accuracy and reliability aren't as big of a factor. Additionally, and weirdly enough, these were comfortable to game on despite their hard bottom out, plus their extreme smoothness and consistency contributed to this. Overall, I'd say these are one of the more balanced gaming switches I've come across. It's a solid choice with barely any functional faults. 7 out of 10. In conclusion, these are smoother, more consistent and more affordable than Cherry MX Silvers. So unless you want an ultra sensitive switch, this is the better choice in my opinion. The final score for this switch is 30 out of 50 or 60%, which is pretty high given these switches aren't to my preferences. And that's the end of the review. Next time I don't know what I'll be testing. Anyway, until then, take care and goodbye.